Well, hello. I hope everyone's doing good and have had an inspiring day. I'm very thankful for being here, and I've been playing a few times today. This is my last play, so I'm going to go and listen to good talks. But I'm going to play two songs for you. Oh, well, my name is Lovis. I call myself Lelo, and I come from Iceland. So I've come far away to play these songs for you. This one is called Please Don't Hate Me. Was anyone here earlier? Okay, so I'm going to do the same songs. Okay. Get your high heels off my chest, 'cause they're hurting me. No need to kick me when I'm already down. No need to shout, I hear you loud and clear. Just please, 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 please don't hate me. What can I do to make everything right? And I've tried my best, and now this is way too much. And I can beg, I can plead, and I can even make you eat. But just please, 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 please don't hate me. And I'm a whining bore, and that I know for sure. Picked out a wrong last word, and I can't say no more. And you can pack, you can leave, you can even make me bleed. But just please, 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 please don't hate me. Thank you. That was one of my oldest songs, and now I'm going to play one new one. This one is called One of Those Nights, and it's about the summer's night in Iceland. One of those nights when the sun doesn't set in my town, ringing in my ears the melody of a song on repeat. And I try to walk in rhythm to the fading of a beat. Ramblin' Jack and the rest of the red, red wine. We sang along, each of us in our own harmony. There's a crackle in my throat when I have to sing along alone. I've tried to keep my emotions from climbing up high, but there's something in that song that sets the mood for romancing and keeps me in love each time I hear that song. Shape-shifting shadows and the scent of a goodbye kiss won't let me be, and they've made themselves my only company on my long and windy walk to wherever I belong. And I've tried to keep my emotions from climbing up high, but there's something in that song that sets the mood for romancing and keeps me in love each time I hear that song. And I've tried to keep my emotions from climbing up high, but there's something in that song that sets the mood for romancing and keeps me in love each time I hear that song. There's a long way to my home, and now I don't have to walk it alone. Tack för det. Thank you. Tack.
Thank you so much. That was, can I take it? That was something totally different. I mean, the mood and everything. Oh, yeah, no, I just feel really happy and safe and, yeah. Well, but panel, please come and join me up here. Well, okay, and then while the panel come here and sit down, I can just say something very briefly about the topic or what we're doing here. So what we're doing in this B section is that we are thinking forward. In the sections called A, we try to learn a bit more about the topic, but here and now we need to think a bit ahead, and that's why the organizations have asked these three experts to come and give their thoughts on what and how we can do things better when it comes to migration and asylum and these things in a gender perspective. But before we go into the material of it all, I would just ask the three of you to briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and your thoughts on this really broad topic. So please go ahead. Yeah.
My name is Ann-Margrethe Austnå. I'm from Norway. I work with the Norwegian Organization for Asylum Seekers. My background is journalism. I've been a journalist, political reporter for many years, and president of the Union of Journalists in Norway. And now I'm working with asylum and rights issues in Norway.
Hi everybody, my name is Trifa Shakeli and I am from Sweden. I have been starting an initiative started a campaign who calls Antizionism for the undocumented women and LGBT persons' right to protection. My background is as a lawyer, social worker, and a writer. Yeah, that's it.
My name is Margrét Steinarsdóttir. I'm the director for the Icelandic Human Rights Center. I am a lawyer, and before I started working for the center, I was working at the Intercultural Center, which was a counseling and information center for immigrants. So I was working there since 2004, and now the Human Rights Center has a service agreement with the Ministry of Welfare to have legal counseling for immigrants. So we're still in this, or I'm still in this role, you might say. Yeah, I think that's all for now, at least.
Okay, thank you so much. Sarah is sitting down here, and she is the rapporteur of this session, so she'll write down whatever she thinks is important and is not mentioned in the text so far. And also, we have some lapper, stykker papir. I don't know if you would pass them out, please. And these are for you to write down whatever you think is important, and afterwards give them to Sarah, and then she will write it all together and take it with her to the text committee. So it's just to make sure that everything is getting, that nothing is forgotten. Okay, but, and Margaret, would you start? And I think actually, I just, before we started, we talked about, letting the questions come afterwards, and maybe if there are, questions on your thoughts on what these women are saying, then wait with that. But if you have questions, there's something you don't understand or something like that, then please just ask right ahead. I think that's best. Okay, yes.
Yeah. See if this works. I have this is a very broad. The issues are many, and I could spoken about many areas of concern when it comes to asylum and migration issues. But I've chosen 4 that I'd like to share with you, and these are. When it comes to the background of the asylum seeker, I see gender-based prosecution as an area where we confront many problems in actually being recognized as a reason for protection. And then there's the Dublin Regulation. There's a lot to be said about the Dublin Regulation, but what we see now is especially highlighted with the Syrian refugees, many of them being very traumatized and being sent around in Europe as parcels. It's a depressing part of this European system. And then we have the claim of passports to document your identity. After 9/11, the claim of documentation of identity has grown stricter and stricter in most Western countries, including all of the Europeans, and this gives many problems, not least to vulnerable single mothers coming as refugees. And then you have the general criminalization of immigrants, the crimmigration, so-called. To start with the gender-based prosecution, I speak mainly out of the experience I have from Norway, but I also can reflect some of impressions I have or information that I have on the situation in other Nordic countries. But in Norway, my organization has raised concern over our experience, especially with Ethiopian women, where we've been seen systematically use of rape and other humiliating treatment of women. And to us, it's quite clear that this is not random. It's women that are either married to, daughters of, mothers to, or closely related to political opposition figures. And they are taken in for questioning, they are rounded up through razzias, or they are arrested, and they all experience rape in that connection, and most of them that rape has been committed by people in uniform. But still, Norwegian immigration authorities see this as individual incidents of crime being committed to them, of people in uniform going out of line, and not as systematic use of gender-based prosecution. This is a big problem, and it needs attention, and it needs to be followed up by rights organizations and lawyers and representatives of refugees. The Dublin Regulation, as I mentioned, especially now we see the returns within the Dublin procedure of highly traumatized Syrian women, especially we see this with stateless Palestinians coming from the large camps in Syria, like Yarmouk. Some of you have probably seen pictures from and heard the stories of how people have been starved in Yarmouk, and the violations of human dignity going on there. And so we see women that have actually been able to flee with small children, and they are now sent back from Norway to Malta, Italy, Bulgaria. In Malta and Bulgaria, they will be detained, which I personally think is a disgrace with the situation in Syria going on. But it's not only the Syrians, it's vulnerable people being sent as parcels, and this need to be addressed for a new round of amendments to the Dublin Regulation. And then the demand of passports, of valid passports as the only recognized documentation of ID. And in Norway we see this, even though 90% and more can substantiate their ID by other documents, school documents, marriage certificates, birth certificates, driver's licenses, lots of other documents, language tests, knowledge tests about the area they're telling they're coming from the group, religious or other they claim to be part of, the history of the political party they claim to be a part of, or whatever. But still, we see quite a number of, especially single mothers with either themselves health problems or with sick children, and these are seen as vulnerable, so vulnerable that they are given the right to stay on humanitarian grounds, and still they're given restricted rights because of this. They cannot document their ID through passport. And the last is a broader group of problems arising from the use of penal code in many countries instead of the regulation, for instance, in the return directive against irregular migrants or asylum seekers that have been denied the right to stay. So they are so that people around them that are helping them in different ways, and landlords renting flats for them, are being punished in countries like Finland and Denmark. And at least that's within the legislation and the practice, the way it's documented by the Fundamental Rights Agency in Europe. And in Norway, we see that even though it's not practiced, the right to fine landlords, and there it has been turned down by the parliament as suggestion that schools and health care should report on irregular migrants attending and or approaching them. There is this fear of approaching, and this diminishes the health of migrant women, migrants in general, but we see especially single mothers responsible for children, that this is deteriorating the health of these families. And we see this group as especially vulnerable when it comes to sexual exploitation, and also the impunity granted people exploiting them and people committing crimes against them because they're fear of approaching authorities. So, in short, my suggestion for demands from a Nordic forum would be seriously to take rape by police and other gender-based prosecution as an independent cause of protection, to demand amendments to the Dublin Regulations, and to accept substantiation of ID when it comes to vulnerable groups and vulnerable persons that are otherwise granted the right to stay, that they must have their full rights. And then criminal laws must not be applied in a way that they undermine fundamental rights, which in my meaning, we do see today, also in Nordic countries. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Okay. Well, yeah. Just a second, because you need to get into the computer so you can be street.
Ah, nice. Very important. Just a question, and the first point there, do you also think about, for example, women fleeing from domestic violence from countries where domestic violence isn't at all seen as something that's wrong and something that's in the private and shouldn't be handled? Because I feel that those women are that's an even kind of heavier, a lower, a more, a harder way to get their kind of claims. What do you feel about that?
Their situation can be just as bad, but it's a lot harder to have them recognized as within protection rights to begin with, because the statement would be that their countries are capable of protecting them, even though that does not happen. In principle, they can be protected.
Because I know that in the US, this is a question that's been driven quite far, and that there has been a few kind of big, how do you say, mål, like,
Cases.
no, not goals, cases, cases that have, court cases that have actually, where the woman has gotten a asylum because of this. For example, I think a woman that fled from Guatemala. So that it's possible, but it's hard, but yeah.
I think also in Nordic countries you can see individual cases being granted the right to stay on humanitarian grounds, but you wouldn't get protection.
We have examples from Iceland of that, for example.
FMI joined in Sweden, the foreign law after 2006 changed, so the gender-based violence is a case to give protection and give a status as a refugee. So according to utlänningslagen, the gender-based violence, or any violence whose methods you can interpret as a gender-based violence, is a ground to give this person protection or a status as a refugees. So according to law, it's possible, yes.
Thank you. I was also just wondering, this Dublin Convention, it seems to be the root of lots of really bad things. Yeah, can you say something about it? Maybe a little bit more about, where it came from when it came into place, and if, is it, very difficult for the countries to go together and amend?
It's it came in to actually to secure that refugees would be secured, that their case would be handled in one country, that they could not be just swapped from one country to the other without having access to the asylum procedure. But it has developed since geography is what it is in Europe, and most refugees are entering Europe through the southern or southeastern countries of Europe, that these countries would be the first countries that would register the refugees with fingerprints or register them as asylum seekers for, and the refugees end up in a catch-22 situation, because when you enter a country, in none of the European countries or none of the countries within the Schengen area, you can apply for a visa as a refugee or an asylum seeker. You have to enter by smugglers or by other means. And then when you are discovered, or you are met by police, or you are found crossing a border, to be able to have a legal presence in the country, you have to register yourself as an asylum seeker, even though you had no plans of seeking asylum in that country. That country is just a country of transit for you. So now the Dublin Regulation works so that many of the northern European countries, when asylum seekers leave the southern countries and come northward, they are returned back to the southern countries. And then, as I mentioned, to countries like Malta and Bulgaria that detains refugees as part of the procedure. And you can, in Bulgaria, the system is not built to handle the number of asylum seekers coming now from Syria through Turkey and into Bulgaria after the borders between Turkey and Greece were closed, more or less. And so, in general, people can stay detained for quite a long time without having any access to the asylum procedure. They are just registered by police and put in detention and have to wait. So some of them flee, manage to escape of detention and get to another country. The other countries see that, you're registered as an asylum seeker in Bulgaria, we'll send you back. And then some countries like Norway now, with the new government we have, even give them an expulsion order, which if you again try to leave Bulgaria, you are denied access to all the other Schengen countries as well with the expulsion order.
Might I just add one thing? The Dublin Regulation, as you say, it was supposed to ensure that all asylum seekers' cases would be heard. It was also supposed to ensure that the countries receiving most asylum seekers would not be drowning, so that if a country would issue a visa to enter, because sometimes you get a visa just to visit the Schengen area, but then you seek asylum when you get there, or the first country that you land in, if you go from one country to another, it was also supposed to, you might say, share the burden, but it has actually resulted in the countries swamped with asylum seekers, as Bulgaria.
Ideal women shelters and Kriscentrum for Kvinnor, which is communal, which is by state woman shelter, so they get the budget to open up for women shelter. Where we are standing now for about 2 years. Before I came here, I was looking around and calling all women shelters, and also the Red Cross Sweden just made a report about what's happening for women, undocumented women needing women shelters, and the report shows that women shelter actually doesn't. It's like a lottery. Some social workers says it's okay, we give money for women shelters. Some says no. So we need some concrete riktlinjer and very concrete to. We have good decisions, some good decisions somewhere, but we need to see that undocumented women's situation are a question for a woman movement, a question for all of us who's working with the domestic violence, not only a question about migration and asylum seekers. And I'm just staying here and open up for questions. Thank you.
Let's give them all a hand. Okay, so does anyone of you have a question? Otherwise, I can go first. Okay, I will then. Well, thank you very much for telling us about the situation and about the legal problems and about what could be done. I was wondering about something that's not so legal in a way. It's more when humans are waiting for the decision on whether they should be given asylum or not. Are there any considerations on if there should be different things or gender mainstreaming in your countries? Because I think I'm from Denmark and there aren't really any women might have special needs or special things that men don't and otherwise. Is that something that your countries are aware of? And do you have like a method or something you could suggest that would be a good idea to look into? Also with LGBT persons would be, yeah.
My experience from Norway is that it varies a lot with the reception centers. It's a lot to do with the leadership, with the ideology, with the work culture of the reception center and the resources they have to, and how, in Norway at least, the most buildings that are used for reception centers were never built as reception centers. They are old military or old sanatoriums for chest sick people or buildings made for other purposes. So it varies how well they can organize family parts of the reception center and parts for single women. But what we see in general is that it can be hard for single women. They can be the peer pressure on them, how to behave is harsh, and especially on LGBT persons. We have had situations where they have actually been attacked by other asylum seekers at the reception centers, and the same goes for converts from Islam to Christianity. That's not respected by Muslim asylum seekers from the same country. So there's a lot of intern conflicts among the asylum seekers. Asylum seekers is not per definition more peaceful, more broader-minded, more anything. They are just like other people, and they have their biases, and they have their traditions, and they have the things that they have fled from, but that doesn't mean that they don't have biases towards other people and other groups. So when we see this as there are guidelines and there is information about what is legally accepted in Norway and what is considered a crime and what is and household rules within the reception centers. But whether this is worked on systematically or not all comes down to one, the resources, and two, especially the leadership and the ideology of the reception center.
Yeah, I guess also it's a little bit like, there aren't really reporters coming every now and then and telling, what's going on in there. I guess that's also a problem. Or, yeah, do you have a...
Well, you have to bear in mind that Iceland is such a small country, and the number of asylum seekers in Iceland has been each year, far below 100, except I think there was one year where the newcomers were a little over 100, but still it's quite a large percentage for such a small nation. But I think actually that in a way we benefit from being so small, because the closeness of our community basically enables us to build up a strong contact network, so that for example, in Suðurnes, which is where the asylum seekers were, actually they had the option of staying in this hostel, and those who were on their own stayed there, and then they had housing in Keflavik, for example, which is in Suðurnes, for families and women on their own, and underage children, which have been very few. Only a handful, I think. And the social services are monitoring them. I think what is most lacking is actually the expertise. I know of only two psychologists, for example, who have experience from one of them from Denmark, with working with asylum seekers, and also with working with people with Keflavik Airport, because we have this one international airport in Iceland, and very few come with ships, or so most come through Keflavik Airport, and she has been in the past years educating the border control, the police. They have been educated on trafficking, also gender-based violence, of course, speaking before of the effort, combating the combined effort against domestic violence. So in that regard, we're actually in an excellent position. But what we need to see is that the model from Suðurnes be brought to all parts of Iceland, just so that people will also recognize those being trafficked for sexual exploitation, labor purposes, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question.
Thank you. Well, it's more like a comment, I guess, than a question. And I hope my English will work out as well. Thank you so much. It has been very interesting. My name is Anna, and I'm working at the Swedish Migration Board. Well, I do think that we are improving a lot at the Swedish Migration Board, and we are starting to receive education, for example, in normkritik, and we have our own experts. For example, where I work in Uppsala, we have LGTB experts, and also they are doing some kind of project regarding gender that is supposed to be, I think, I'm not sure, implemented in 2015, where we are supposed to be more active when it comes to consider women, for example, women needs, women issues, what happens if women return to their home countries. If we have a family at place, who will we talk to first, the women or the men in the family? For example, if it's heterosexual, or a family in that case with a mother, father, and children. But I think that there is a lot of work to be done. But
rule, I agree, it's a problem. So I have two questions for Trifa. Do you think it would be possible legally to remove the 2-year rule here in Sweden? And the other one, would it be possible, do you think, also for migration board to look at the ones repeating it systematically over and over and over again?
I don't get the other question.
People people repeating domestic violence with one partner, then the next partner, and then the third partner, and then the fourth partner, being granted permit again and again. Can this be stopped somehow, you think?
So let's take the other, and let's hope that your answer is yes and yes.
My name is René Francheur, and I come from Motala, and I belong to EKFF, you know. And what we see in Motala, it's a developing anti-Ziganism. We see lots of Roms, many of them women, who are begging in the streets, and people who react against it. And we have a political party in Sweden who now wants to forbid begging, and who has this Sverigedemokraterna, and they have had a big campaign against the Rome people in our country. So I just wonder, what could we do to protect the Romes and their poverty? Because it is a question of poverty.
It's a very little
Yes.
question. Let me answer your questions, and the short answer is yes and yes. Of course, when Rosa Parks was sitting in the front of that bus and said, "I'm sitting here because it was forbidden for black women to sit in the bus," it was impossible for that time. People said, if could this be possible? It is possible. We have a black president and White House. So, of course, all legal changes are possible. We must believe that. Otherwise, the hope for human beings is just vanished. But the detailed answer for that, the 2 years rule, I mean, it's very easy. Just take it away. Why we have that? It's just logically, and for a country which not the more equal country in the world anymore, it's a shame for us. But the country also, we have a feminist movement, we have a woman movement with the power. It's actually shame that we have that 2 years rule that makes legally give the woman a position of vulnerability directly when they come to Sweden. So the other question, it's happening. Men taking women from Thailand, taking women from Russia, and they know the rule. They say, if you go say anything, I'm going to the immigration office and deport you. And it happens. It happens. We have two ideas in the debate right now. Some people says give the woman information before they come to Sweden. That's the idea to also limit the immigration. And the other idea says, no, just abandon this man. Look at their cases before you give them the opportunity to take women, or the best of the world. Just take. We don't need 2 years rule. I just don't know what logic they have it. If you look at the also foreign utlänningslagen, foreign law in Sweden, they said the highest level of the violence. So it might be a reason for you to, before the 2 years year law, get asylum by yourself. So that's actually they telling us that some kind of violence, you should just take it. It's okay for women from other countries without. That is true. That's in Swedish foreign law.
The other question is for you as well.
Yeah. First of time, people talking about the European citizens in Sweden, like EU migrant, that's wrong. When we made the European Union, so that's a law. European citizenship, they are citizens. You have free rörlighet, I don't know, movement. So that could be for everybody. You cannot say free movement for doctors, for wealthy people from US, from Poland to come, but not for rooms. That just doesn't make, that's a racist, and I don't know what to say. And about the begging and how we protect rooms. Rooms, we have a lot of Swedish citizens who all rooms. Must be some rooms in this room who force us to change their name. We have Soraya Post now in the European Parliament. Her mother was sterilized by force by Swedish government. So we have a history of colonialization and violence against minorities in this country. Roms are Swedes as we are, and they are living here. So, yeah, that's what I have to say.
Mm-hmm. I think we have the final question here.
Sorry, it's not really. I just wanted to list something. I think you said something about it and about the psychological aspects of it all. Women that come here that are very traumatized. Almost everybody is in a migration process, first of all, and also being hidden or being through the asylum process is very, very hard. Do you feel that, I know my sister works a lot with, she's a psychologist with PTSD, and that there needs to be much, much more resources in this issue. Do you have a comment on that in the people that you meet and what we can demand from the government to see in this question?
Yeah, okay. You know, this is an aspect of it. Of course, all women I meet in my work are traumatized by the history that nobody's refugees because of its fun. So it's a history of violence in background, but also the history of living hidden in Sweden. It's also a history of the violence who says something about us, how we treat other people in our community. But yes, and also desperate people making desperate decisions. All those women also making a lot of questionable, strange decision in their life. Sometimes you think, why you do this? Why you never came to the court? Why you missed your time? Because these people are traumatized. You are desperate. You make desperate decisions. That's what happened. So yes, of course, we should need some of our demands for a campaign are to give resources also for the women shelters to give psychological help also for the children, but also for the woman who is coming to the women shelter, just like other women who needed emergency shelters in Sweden.
Well, thank you so much for coming and telling us about the conditions and about what we should demand from our governments, and keep up the work that you're doing. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's give you guys a hand. And so if any of you have written down something, please give the note to Sarah. Yeah?
I think actually that just a brief comment on the 2-year rule. I think actually that it's against the Istanbul Convention. So the countries who want to ratify the Istanbul Convention, they need to change if they have a 2-year rule. Because it's exactly saying that women in abusive relationships and so on, they should be given the opportunity of getting out of the relationship and apply for an independent permit and so on. So there isn't really any time limit. So I think that, Sweden will have to change the law, I would say. Yeah.